My name is Maria Hartwell, and even now, when I look back at my childhood, the first thing that comes to my mind is our old house in Ravensburg, Ohio. It was an ordinary American town, not famous for anything, not filled with anything special, but it was the place where my life took its first sharp turn. The house itself was a two-story place with faded blue paint, a shaky porch, and windows that whistled in the winter wind. It had an attic full of dusty boxes and a basement that always smelled like wet concrete and old memories. For most of my life, I thought that house was my safe place. I believed the walls protected me, that the people inside loved me simply because we shared the same last name. I was wrong. I learned that the people who claim to love you can also be the ones to push you into darkness, without hesitation. Growing up there, I always felt like I lived in someone else's shadow. My parents compared me to my brother even before he did anything worth comparing. Darren was 2 years older than me, and to my parents, he could do nothing wrong. Even when we were children, he was the favorite. He broke the living room window once while playing baseball inside the house, and my parents blamed me for not stopping him. When he failed a math exam, they told me I should have helped him study better. Every mistake he made became a lesson for me, and every success he even pretended to have was treated like a miracle. Still, I held on. I kept trying to make them proud, even if it meant giving up small pieces of myself. Everything changed the day Darren came home claiming he had finished medical school in London, Europe. He stepped into the house carrying a dark brown leather bag that looked too new, too shiny, as if it had never touched a hospital hallway. He wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that made my stomach feel tight. My parents didn't see any of that. They rushed to him like he was a hero returning from war. My mother cried tears of joy, hugging him so tightly that I wondered if he could breathe. My father shook Darren's hand with such pride you would think he had just saved the whole town. Meanwhile, I stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching the scene like I didn't belong there. I knew something was off. I had seen Darren's strange late-night emails. I had noticed how he avoided talking about his classes. I had heard the phone calls where he whispered about payments and documents. But every time I tried to bring it up to my parents, they shut me down. "Don't be jealous, Maria," they said. "Your brother is going to be a great doctor." They believed every word he told them because they wanted to. They needed their son to be special. In their eyes, their pride mattered more than the truth. The moment that truly broke me came later that evening. They had just finished eating dinner, at a table I wasn't invited to sit at, even though I had cooked half of the food. I walked into the living room, expecting at least a simple smile or a small sign that I was part of the family celebration. Instead, my parents looked at me with faces that didn't match the people who raised me. My mother folded her arms, and my father stood with his hands behind his back like he was about to make an announcement. "Maria," my mother said, "Darren needs your room. From now on, you can sleep in the basement." For a moment, I thought it was a joke. I actually laughed a little and asked if they were serious. But my father didn't laugh. He simply pointed toward the basement door like he was ordering a stranger to leave his sight. The basement. The place I feared most. Cold floors, dark corners, spiders, and the smell of mold that clung to your clothes no matter how many times you washed them. I stared at them, waiting for someone to change their mind. But they just stood there, united in their decision, united in their belief that my comfort did not matter. "I'm not sleeping in the basement," I said, my voice soft but firm. I didn't expect what came next. My father's voice rose first, sharp and angry. Then my mother followed, each word hitting me harder than a slap. "We don't need you. You're useless. Get out of the house." It felt like someone had taken the floor out from under me. I had heard harsh words before, but never like this. Never from the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. Something inside me broke, but another part of me, quiet, small, but strong, finally woke up. So I walked to my room, packed a few clothes, put my laptop in my bag, and left the house. I didn't cry. Not a single tear. I stepped out into the cool evening air and walked down the street without looking back. In that moment, the house I once called home became just another building. The people inside became strangers. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't going back. Not then. Not until something changed. But here's the thing my parents didn't know. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't know the secrets that were about to catch up to Darren. They didn't know that the truth was already creeping toward them, slow but unstoppable. They didn't know that the next morning, their perfect world would fall apart. And they didn't know that kicking me out wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. The morning after my parents threw me out, I woke up in a cheap room I had rented for one night in Maplebridge, Illinois. The room was small, barely big enough for the single bed and a wooden table that leaned a little to the left. The window looked out onto a quiet street lined with maple trees, and for the first time in years, I felt the strange silence of being alone. It wasn't peaceful yet. It was heavy, like my mind hadn't caught up with my freedom. But somewhere under that weight, there was a spark, small, warm, stubborn. A spark that said, this might be the start of something new. Still, the anger and hurt sat in my chest like a rock, and no matter how much I tried to shake it off, I knew I couldn't fully breathe until I faced the truth about Darren. I didn't want revenge, not really. What I wanted was clarity. I wanted to see with my own eyes what happened when lies finally stopped running and had to face the consequences. So I took the first bus back to Ravensburg, Ohio, arriving just after sunrise. I didn't go inside the neighborhood right away. Instead, I stood at the corner of Cedar Mill Road, the long street that led straight to our old house. I stayed under the shadow of a tall oak tree, watching the house from a distance. It looked the same as always, quiet, pale, tired. My parents' old red car sat in the driveway like it hadn't moved for days. The yard was empty. No one was outside. It felt almost frozen in time. I wrapped my arms around myself, partly because of the cold morning air, partly because of the memories pressing in on me. I didn't know what I expected to happen, but I didn't have to wait long for something unusual. At first, I heard a faint sound, like someone tapping metal in the distance. Then the sound grew louder, sharper, a quick series of sirens cutting through the calm morning like knives. Within minutes, 5 police cars turned the corner, one after another, their lights flashing in bright red and blue. They raced toward my parents' house, stopping so suddenly that 2 of the officers almost bumped into each other. I froze. I didn't move, didn't blink. All I could do was watch as the officers jumped out of their cars and rushed toward the house. The front door swung open as if someone inside had already been waiting for them. My parents ran out first. My father looked confused, his eyebrows twisted in anger and fear. My mother clutched her hands to her chest as she asked the officers what was happening, though her voice shook so much I couldn't make out the words from where I stood. They looked like 2 people who had built their entire life on a single belief, only to realize that belief was made of paper. Then I saw Darren. He stumbled out of the house in handcuffs, his hair a mess and his face pale. 2 officers held him tightly by the arms. He didn't look like a doctor. He didn't look like someone who had just finished medical school in Europe. He looked like someone whose world had crashed so fast he didn't even have time to pretend it was still standing. He shouted that it was all a misunderstanding. He begged the officers to let him go. He kept saying he had the right paperwork, that everything was legal, that someone must have made a mistake. But I knew the truth. I had seen the online receipts he hid. I had found the emails he deleted. He had paid someone in Europe thousands of dollars to create a fake degree, one that said he had graduated from a real medical school. He had never taken a single class in person. He had never treated a patient. He had lied to everyone, even to himself. When my parents realized what was happening, truly realized it, the change in their faces was painful to watch. My father's anger faded into shock, and my mother's confusion turned into something like heartbreak. They tried to talk to the officers, but no one was listening anymore. The law had stepped in, and the truth had consequences. I stood there, hidden beneath the oak tree, my throat tight. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I didn't feel joy in seeing my brother arrested. All I felt was a strange mix of sadness and justice. He had been given everything, trusted with everything, loved without limits, even when he didn't deserve it. And now, finally, the truth had caught up to him. When the police cars drove away with Darren in the back seat, the neighborhood fell into a thick silence. My parents stood alone in the driveway, staring at the empty street as if they were waiting for the world to give them answers. But the world owed them nothing. My phone buzzed that evening. I already knew who it was before I looked at the screen. My mother's name lit up, her message short, her words soft in a way they had never been before. "Maria, we're so sorry. Please come home." For a long moment, I sat on the edge of the bed in my rented room, staring at those words. I imagined my mother crying, imagined my father sitting in the kitchen, his head in his hands, finally realizing how wrong they had been. And for a moment, yes, I felt something close to pity. But forgiveness isn't something you can pull out of your pocket just because someone asks for it. Forgiveness is built on trust, and they had broken mine so completely that I didn't know how to repair it. I typed slowly, choosing every word with care. "I need time." I didn't lie. I didn't pretend everything was fine. I didn't rush back into their arms. I simply told them the truth. After I sent the message, I put my phone face down and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet again, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt clear. It felt open, like a door had finally closed behind me, and another one was waiting in front of me. My life had just changed forever. And this time, the change was mine. After everything that happened with my family and with Darren's arrest, I didn't return home. I didn't even walk down the street where my house stood, as if avoiding it would help me avoid the memories buried inside it. But deep down, I wasn't angry in the way people expect. I wasn't planning revenge, and I didn't wish harm on anyone. I just felt tired of being the shadow in a house that never saw me, tired of proving my worth to people who refused to see it. So I stayed in Maplebridge, Illinois, a place where no one knew my name or my past. The room I rented was small, but it had something important. It was mine. Mine alone. The walls were dull beige. The lights flickered sometimes, and the heater groaned every time I turned it on. But when I shut the door at night, the silence belonged to me. No shouting. No cold orders. No one pointing at a basement door, as if that was where I belonged. For the first few days, I didn't do anything except breathe, really breathe. I sat on the edge of my bed and felt the weight of my life slowly settle into something I could hold without breaking. But I knew I couldn't hide forever. I needed money, and I needed a life that was more than running from my past. So I opened my old laptop, the same one my father said wasn't worth keeping, and I started searching for online work. I didn't have fancy degrees or certificates, but I had something else: patience and an internet connection. I began with small tasks, writing short product descriptions, editing simple essays, creating plain logos for people who were starting small businesses. My hands shook the first time I sent my work to someone, as if they were holding a piece of me. I feared criticism. I feared being told I wasn't good enough, just like my parents had said so many times. But people didn't say that. They thanked me. They paid me. They told me they liked my work. Slowly, my confidence grew. Not fast, not loudly, but steadily, like a candle that refuses to go out even when the wind tries to steal its flame. The day I earned my first $1,000, I stared at the number on my screen for a long time. My chest felt warm, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud in a way that belonged only to me. Not because someone compared me to my brother. Not because my parents forced me to meet their expectations, but because I did it myself. I earned every single dollar with my own work, with my own hands, with my own mind. I didn't celebrate in a big way. I didn't buy anything fancy. Instead, I walked to the little cafe down the street, Greenhouse Corner Cafe, owned by a kind woman named Lena Whitmore. She smiled when she saw me, because I had been going there often, hiding at a corner table while working on my laptop. "You look happy today," Lena said as she handed me a warm cup of cinnamon coffee. "I earned my first $1,000, I told her, unable to stop smiling. She clapped her hands together. "Well then, this cup is on the house." That cup of coffee was the sweetest thing I had tasted in years. Even though my parents had hurt me, I still believed in doing what was right. So when I began earning more regularly, I decided to send a little money home, just at first. I thought maybe helping them would soften the pain of what happened. Maybe it would show them that even though they pushed me away, I didn't carry hate in my heart. The first time I sent them a few $100s, my mother replied with a short message. "Thank you, Maria." The words were simple, too simple, almost empty. But I tried to believe there was meaning behind them. For a few weeks, I sent them something every time I was paid. But something inside me began to shift. Every time I transferred the money, I remembered my father pointing toward the basement. I remembered my mother saying they didn't need me, that I was useless. I remembered the way they celebrated Darren and ignored every warning I tried to give them. I remembered standing alone on that street as police cars took him away. One night, I sat in my tiny room with my fingers hovering above the keyboard, ready to send them more money. But I froze. A quiet question echoed inside me. Why am I giving them a part of my hard work when they gave me nothing but pain? It wasn't anger. It was clarity. I realized I didn't owe them my success. I didn't owe them my time, my money, or my peace. So, I simply stopped sending anything. No explanations. No fights. No messages. I let silence do the talking for once in my life. With the money I kept, I began taking better care of myself. I bought real food, vegetables, chicken, fresh bread, fruit, things I couldn't afford when I lived under their roof. I bought a warm jacket for the cold nights. I bought a comfortable pair of shoes so I could walk around Maple Bridge without my feet hurting. And I started saving. Saving for something bigger, something better, a future that didn't depend on anyone's approval. Meanwhile, I heard through distant relatives and neighbors that my parents were struggling. Without Darren, who they believed would be their golden ticket to an easy life, they had to work 2 jobs each. My father picked up shifts at a warehouse, and my mother worked late hours at a bakery in town. They were exhausted. They were overwhelmed. And in a strange way, it made me feel both sad and detached. Sad because they were human and hurting. Detached because I had spent years hurting while they blamed me for everything. I didn't laugh at their pain. I didn't feel happiness in their struggle. But I also didn't rush to fix their world. They had spent so many years depending on Darren that they forgot how to depend on themselves. Now they had no choice but to learn. And I had no choice but to move forward. My life was slowly becoming my own. My money was my own. My choices were my own. And for the first time, the future felt like a place I was allowed to walk into, not as someone's daughter, not as someone's disappointment, but as Maria, a woman who survived, worked, and rose. Months passed like pages turning in a book I was finally writing for myself. Life in Maple Bridge, Illinois had taught me how to stand on my own feet, but now it was time for something bigger. With the money I had saved for my online work, I wanted a place where I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's world. I wanted somewhere that felt fresh, warm, and filled with possibility. So I chose Redwood Heights, Colorado, a small American town surrounded by hills and endless skies. It sounded like freedom, and when I arrived, it felt exactly like that. I rented a small but beautiful house on Silverpine Lane, a quiet street lined with tall pine trees that swayed gently in the wind. The house had large windows that poured sunlight into every corner. There was no basement, no cold concrete floors, no shadows waiting to swallow me. This house felt alive. It smelled of new paint and clean air, and every morning when I opened my eyes, I felt the warmth of sunlight before anything else. It was a feeling I had never known growing up. I turned the extra room into my office. I bought a second-hand wooden desk from a shop run by an older man named Arthur Green. He told me the desk once belonged to a writer from Europe who traveled through America decades ago. I smiled at the idea, imagining that the desk had held someone else's dreams before mine. I placed my laptop on it and promised myself that this room would be the place where I built the life I always wanted. My online business grew faster than I expected. What started as small jobs, short articles, basic logos, simple designs, turned into real projects. Clients from America kept coming, but soon, people from Europe found me, too. Some paid me in dollars, some in pounds. Every message I received made me feel a little more seen, a little more capable, a little more like the Maria who had been hiding inside me for years, waiting for a chance to breathe. I fell into a routine that felt comfortable and new. I woke up early, drank coffee on the porch, worked for a few hours, then took walks around Redwood Heights. I learned the names of the streets, the smell of the bakery a few blocks away, the way the sunlight hit the river near Brooklawn Park in the late afternoon. I learned how it felt to enjoy my own company without feeling lonely. I learned to trust myself, something I had never been allowed to do before. But even as life moved forward, my parents' presence lingered like faint shadows in the back of my mind. They didn't call often, but they wrote messages every few weeks, soft, slow messages filled with apologies and excuses. My mother wrote things like, "We miss you," and "Please come visit when you can." My father's messages were shorter. He wrote, "Hope you are well," or "We think about you," which still surprised me because growing up I never felt like he thought about me at all. I replied out of respect, but not out of obligation. My messages were polite, distant, clean, like a window that lets in light but keeps out the cold. I didn't blame them anymore, but I didn't trust them either. Trust is not something you rebuild in one day or even 1 year. It grows slowly, like a plant you have to water with intention. And I wasn't ready to water it yet. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered what would have happened if they hadn't thrown me out. Would I still be living in that shadowy house in Ravensburg? Would my life still feel small and quiet and wrong? Would I ever have learned what I could do? I didn't know the answers, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Leaving had become the best thing that ever happened to me, even if it came wrapped in pain. I continued building my business, and it became something bigger than I had imagined. I met new people, clients who trusted me, colleagues who inspired me, strangers who believed in my work more than my own parents ever had. Among them was a woman named Claudia Bennett, a client from England. She owned a small store in Europe and hired me to design her brand. Claudia and I exchanged many messages, and over time, she became one of the first people I considered a friend. She always encouraged me, saying my work had personality and strength. Her words were simple, but they filled spaces inside me that had been empty for too long. One afternoon, as I sat outside with my laptop, the sun warming my skin, I realized something important. For years, I had lived with the belief that my value depended on the approval of the people inside that old blue house in Ohio. For years, I had accepted their disappointment as truth, their bitterness as reality, their rejection as something I deserved. But here, in this new place, surrounded by light and silence and possibility, I finally understood that I was never the problem. The problem was the way they chose to see me. And now I no longer needed their eyes to know myself. My parents kept working long hours to keep their house running. They were exhausted, but they were surviving in their own way. Sometimes I wondered if they ever looked at Darren's empty room and thought about the choices they made. Sometimes I wondered if they regretted the years they spent believing in a lie while ignoring the daughter who had been trying to tell the truth. But I didn't dwell on those thoughts too long. The past was heavy, and I had carried it long enough. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, I stood on my porch and took a deep breath. The air felt clean. My heart felt light. The world around me felt open, like a road waiting for me to walk its length. And in that moment, the truth came to me as softly as the wind. I didn't lose a family. I found myself. For years, they used my silence as proof that I was weak. But now my silence was different, strong, steady, calm. I didn't need to shout my worth to anyone. I didn't need to beg for love that was never freely given. I didn't need to return to a house that had never been a home for me. Because this time, for the first time, I chose myself. And sometimes, that's the better story.